Hello and welcome to The Art of Security with me, Josh Davis, and Tyler Reguly. Today, in this pre-episode, we're going to talk about the art of security, why we named the podcast Art of Security, and settle the debate, probably not, for is security more art or more science? Tyler, do you want to kick us off with a rudimentary definition of what science and art are, so we kind of have a good starting point for us to go off?
I thought I was just going to answer the question. The answer is that cybersecurity is art. And then we're done. That's the whole podcast. People don't even need to listen, but they should.
And thank you very much. That's it for today. I'm joking.
Yeah, we're done now. But no, art is creativity to me. I'm a huge, if my background doesn't give it away, huge fan of comics, comic art, music. These are all vinyl. I absolutely love anything artistic. I can't do anything artistic, but I love it. And so for that reason, for me, when I think about cybersecurity, I like to think of it as art, because that way I can think of myself as being artistic when I'm really not. But to me, it's creativity, it's interpretation, it's gut feeling, it's that thing. Whereas when you're talking about science, you're talking about hard, cold facts. You're talking about logic. You're talking about, I guess I want cybersecurity in my mind to give me that warm, fuzzy feeling. And that's what art does. That's not what science does. Science is cold and direct, and to me, art is not.
Wow.
So I guess I'm giving my answer already, which is I think that it's more art than science.
Well, no,
but
it gives me a position to come back at you against, because I think that's a good starting point. The science is methodical, it's logical and rational, and art is. I mean, I think you said a few times that how it makes you feel things, and you want it to be that because you like art, and it's that kind of more subjective component, but also has the creativity and I latch on to gut instinct later on also. But surely it's both, right? I mean, and surely we run computers, they're computer science, how they work is entirely a science. If we look at networking, we look at things like the OSI layers, the 7 layers for networking. Those feel very much to me like science. And as I had to kind of learn about cybersecurity first, I needed to become that computer scientist. Otherwise, I think I'd be useless as a if I came in for an angle as like an artistic security guy.
I'll give you that. One of my favorite things, to the point that my colleagues have often laughed at me, is RFCs. I think RFCs are one of the greatest things that we have. All through college, in my early 20s, I spent all of my time with my BlackBerry loaded with every RFC that existed. And if I was on public transit, if I was riding the bus somewhere, whatever I was doing, I would sit and read RFCs. And for anybody that doesn't know what an RFC is, it defines a standard or a proposal for a standard that is very structured, is very scientific. So I'd be hard pressed to say that there's no science in computer science. I mean, there's a reason why most computer degrees are bachelors of science, not bachelors of arts. Which is, anybody who watched our introduction last time when we talked about the idea of cyber law, and something that both of us had an interest in at various points in our lives. I spent a long time actually looking for a bachelor's of arts program in computer science, specifically so I could use that if I decided to pursue a legal career, as I thought it would be more interesting. But so definitely there's a science aspect. You can't get away from that. Programming is very structured, very logical. But at the same time, very artistic. There is, no two people will write programs the same way. Maybe they will now because they'll vibe code them and they'll all get created the same way. But people who actually know how to program are not going to write programs the same way. They're going to be very different. They're going to be very unique. It could be something as small as variable naming. It could be the way they write their structure. I've seen people write Python programs that I would write as 30 or 40 lines in a single line, because it allows you to do that. There's a lot of flexibility in Python, and so I think that definitely there is science to it. But when you get down to things like signatures and analyses and those sorts of things, there is an art to reverse engineering somebody else's code. there's an art to developing snort detection rules or suricata detection rules. Um, there's a lot of creativity that has to go into figuring these things out and how you're going to get around your problems. And so that's why, to me, the science is always there. Everyone who works in cybersecurity, everyone who works in IT is dealing with the science of it every day, no matter what. But what I think makes people excel in this field is the people who accept the art aspect of it, the people who are willing to approach it with creativity and look at it from that angle. And I think that's a big differentiator.
Yeah, and I think had I you not agreed at all that it was a science, I don't know. This probably would have been a 20 minutes of us arguing about it being science. So I'm glad that we can accept that one. And I think the next thing to focus on is the balance of it. But I will give you that. I think the only time I started becoming an effective security analyst was when I made that distinction that, hang on, this is a little bit more art than science. And I would make the comparison to like cooking versus baking. I think baking is a science. I don't enjoy baking, to be honest, because it's just measuring stuff and whacking it together and following instructions. I do enjoy cooking, where I get to the pinch of this, pinch of that. There is science to that. There's still a recipe to follow, but then you can go off piste and see what else you can create. I think security was very much that. In my early SOC days, I was terrified because I was like, I don't know enough of this science. I don't know how all these systems work. We're asked to secure a huge variety of systems. I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where everyone will just have their one little niche. Maybe that's the future for AI agents, but not the topic for today. But it was that realizing it's more of an art form and realizing that I think there are so many unknowns here that if you approach it from a scientific mindset only, then you're going to need to. The scientific method is slow. It needs to establish fundamental truths and then test out hypotheses and repeat it over and over again and then create an almost formulaic, here's how things work, here's how you respond, here's what you do. And yeah, there are playbooks for that, but they run out and you have to use your kind of own artful insight or gut instinct is something that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to latch onto, because there are some responses to that hey, gut instinct is maybe gatekeeping of security and saying that it's instinctual rather than taking the time to actually analyze what the steps that you take every single time. So yeah, in that respect, is it a social science? Is it just, are we calling it art because there's people element involved in here? Or is it still a science, but it's just the science of human intuition and human beings, and that could be distilled down into a kind of scientific formula, albeit many, many formulas for many, many scenarios?
I'm going to stick with art. And I actually think you gave me my argument for this. When we saw the rise of AI image generation, which is truly one of the most awful things humanity has ever produced. What we saw was people using it to create images and saying, "I'm an artist now." Artists they made the claim, artists for years have been gatekeeping the ability to create art. And now, and you use the word gatekeeping, see, I'm tying it together and trying to make a real argument here. But they said, artists are gatekeeping art. Well, no, artists weren't gatekeeping art. Artists were willing to put in the time and effort and energy to learn those skills, to be able to sit down and draw Superman or Batman or whoever your favorite character is, the Ninja Turtles, for example. They put in hours upon hours, years upon years to hone that skill and that talent. And so they're not gatekeeping it. They're effective practitioners of it. And you are using generative AI to produce a cheap knockoff facsimile that has none of the feeling, none of the soul of that hand-produced art. And I think that security is very much the same thing. So when people say, oh, you're just gatekeeping cybersecurity by saying there's a gut reaction to it, no, it's years of experience. It's years of being that cybersecurity practitioner, of applying it time and time again, of seeing the situations playing out, that allow you to develop and hone that skill in the same way that an artist hones their artistic capabilities.
And I think the metaphors between your cartoon metaphors are going to stick through, and I'm going to use ancient history one because that's where my nerdage mind always goes to. But yeah, it's war. I think it's the art of the war, and I think what distinction we need to make there, and it's kind of what you were saying towards the end of like acting upon things, doing things, honing it over time, but not really being able to condense down what the fundamental components are that allow you to respond in, say, the face of a 0 day, something that no one has ever seen before, and then all systems are everyone's in the panic zone. That in my early career, I had this senior analyst come up to us who told us I was a little bit scared of. He was quite intimidating. He was former military, very American, very experienced, and he asked me a question about something that it was an emerging threat. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I kind of gave my answer like, "Oh, here's what I know about something." I think it was to JavaScript, as a lot of them are. Here's what I know about JavaScript. Here's how this can maybe apply to that. Did I get it right? And he turned around to me and kind of in cruder language, his language said, "How the hell should I know? I've the first time I'm looking at this too." And I think that was when I realized, okay, that it isn't just about knowing the science of this all. It's about being able to artfully apply the knowledge that you have. So the distinction there with art, I would agree with, right? Pencils are maybe a science, but how you use them, that's artful. That's where the kind of art is. So despite my initial early opposition, I would lean on an agreement that it's both. And I would also lean to the side of the art. But, I think if we were to boil down what this podcast is about, and why we chose the art of security, nobody really wants to listen to the science of cybersecurity, and I don't think they'd get that much for it. There's a lot of factors at play. If I go back to my art of war analogy, there's office politics, there's culture in the business, there's an ever-evolving battlefield of technology and SaaS applications, and new AI issues because people are coding badly or whatever. So the battlefield's constantly shifting. So you have to apply the science that in a kind of artful manner. So why does that matter for this podcast? What can a podcast teach you about the art of different things in cybersecurity in 20 minutes or less?
I think the interesting thing is perspective. You get the perspective of two people who have two very different backgrounds in cybersecurity. The perspective of people who, at least in my case, want to take this artistic approach. And let's be realistic. You were talking about all the reasons why, we're not talking about the science, but let's talk about the main one. Nobody wants to sit and read technical publications all day long. That is not fun. And I say that as somebody who, if you listen to the last episode, I talked about, this episode, I don't remember anymore. RFCs. I love RFCs. I talk about them all the time. And I love reading them, but I love reading them to find the interesting things about them to tell other people. Because I know that not everyone wants to sit and read every RFC. Because not everyone wants to sit and read scientific papers. And so I think listening to this podcast, I hope that what the listeners are taking away from this is a breakdown of this was the science, or this is the science behind this topic, but here's the gut feeling, the gut reaction, here's the application of our knowledge that is artistic to this scenario to give you a little bit of insight into it. Let's be honest, if you're somebody who's spent the last 40 years in this field, you're probably listening to laugh at us, and that's fine too. You can sit and you can laugh as much as you want at us. But I think that a lot of the breakdowns we're going to end up doing are going to be more appealing potentially to those newer to the field, to those who have an interest in the field, to get that artistic perspective that maybe when you're starting out, you don't see. You look at it as a hard science. And so I really hope I'm wrong and that everyone loves this. And if you've been doing this for 40 years, tell us what's kept you doing it for 40 years in the comments, because I would love to know that. And I'd love to talk about that in the future.
Yeah. Would that help you go for 40 more, do you reckon? Is that what you're looking for, motivation?
If I'm still doing this in 40 years,
who knows?
I'll be well into my 80s at that point.
Or we may have achieved immortality if we're optimism, or if we're not optimistic, you won't be able to retire. But I think also for me, it wouldn't be a fun podcast if we were debating the science of security, because that has one true answer, really, in most scenarios. So this does allow us to operate in the little gray areas that, big concepts that maybe can help you apply to your security strategy if you are a CISO or a security leader, as well as somebody who's maybe, like I was when I first started out in security, kind of a little bit naive as to how it actually works in the real world beyond the science of what you see on your screen, or the art of you analyzing an exploit, or threat hunting adjacent data. So you have a really nice tagline that I've heard you say before about security not being an exact science. Do you have that fresh to mind? Because I think that's a great way to wrap this up.
I mean, no, I don't. And I know you just read it to me from one of my own articles yesterday. So I should, but again, old age does weird things to your mind. And so I get to be the one to finally use the old age excuse on this podcast between the two of us. So I think that's fantastic. And I'm gonna just resort to using that. But I do feel that, cybersecurity relies on the practice of art. And I'll let you say what apparently my tagline is.
So I did write it down that cybersecurity isn't an exact science, but it's an art informed by experience. I think that captures what we want to do in this podcast. Capture the experience that we have, and maybe artfully relay it to help people with cybersecurity insights. Because it's not just about learning textbooks or reading RFCs. It's about interpretation. It's about using wisdom and experience to maybe get close to mastering this, rather than relying on mechanical precision. So yeah, join us, listen along. We're going to keep arguing about these things, and definitely, I put forward the science angles. I agree this is more art than science also, Tyler. So I'll give you this episode.